مصاحبه من با میدیا بنجامین، فعال یهودی آمریکایی که خیلیاتون شاید بشناسین ایشون رو، به ویژه در فضای فارسی زبان هم او معروفه به خاطر تلاش هایی که کرده در به هم زدن جلسات بسیاری از سیاستمداران غربی، از جمله مهمترینش در زبان فارسی جلسه برایان هوک معرفی کنم. همین اواخر یکی از کارهایی که کردن دستهای خونالودی بود که باهاش جلسات رو در فضای آمریکا به هم زدن. یکی از بنیانگذاران شبکه‌ای به اسم کد پینک که شبکه زنان آمریکایی برای صلح، عده‌ای از زنان فمینیستی هستن که به شکلی همزمان علیه مطامع امپریالیستی آمریکا می‌جنگن و همه جا اصلا چهره‌هاشون رو با لباس‌های صورتی به میدان میان. خانم میدیا بنجامین همزمان به ایران هم سفر کرده و اخیراً هم به در مورد اوکراین کتابی نوشته به اسم War in Ukraine Making Sense of a Senseless Conflict، سر در آوردن از یک جنگ بی‌معنا. قبل از اون درباره رابطه سعودی و آمریکا افشاگری کرده، کتابی به اسم Kingdom of the Unjust، پادشاهی بی‌عدالتی Behind the US Saudi Connection، پشت پرده روابط آمریکا و سعودی و در واقع نقاطی که سیاست خارجی آمریکا متمرکزه. اونجاها جایی است که میدیا بنجامین در تقریبا میشه گفت 4-3 دهه گذشته بوده، از سال 2000 به این سمت، قبل از اون روی بحث‌های اقتصادی، روی فیر ترید و روی زورگویی هایی که IMF و آمریکا روی جنوب جهانی میکردن بیشتر متمرکز بود از ابتدای جنگ علیه ترور، اما تمرکز خودش رو گذاشت روی رسوایی ماشین صنعتی نظامی آمریکا یا میلیتاری اینداستریال کامپلکس و همینطور ماشین جنگ در مورد افغانستان، عراق، لیبی، سوریه و همینطور هم تحریم هایی که روی ایران، ونزوئلا و کشورهای دیگه هستش. تا به حال چند بار به ایران سفر، 3 بار به ایران سفر کرده و کتابی نوشته به اسم Inside Iran The Real History Politics of the Islamic Republic، درون ایران، تاریخ و سیاست واقعی جمهوری اسلامی. و این هم تصویری است که حالا احتمالا اگر خاطرتون باشه از برخوردش برای جلسه‌ای که درش برایان هوک، یکی از کسانی که می‌خواست ایران رو بهش فشار بیشتری بیاره، تحریمش کنه و سیاست‌های جنایتکارانه ماکسیموم پرشر رو بر ایران اعمال کنه، اون یک از جلسات بود که ایشون به هم زد. جلسه دیگری که شاید خیلیاتون ازش مطلع باشین جلسه خود اوباما بودش که میدیا بنجامین به هم زد. من حالا این رو پیدا کردم، اگه اجازه بدین با هم دیگه تکیش رو ببینیم.
To a new level of accountability for its destructive behavior, especially its lawless pursuit of ballistic missiles. Thank you.
The world community wants to keep the Iran nuclear deal. Our allies are the Germans, the French, the British. They want to keep in this deal. The world community wants to.
این به شکلی در پاسخ برایان هوک که تقاضای تحریم‌های بیشتر، فشار بیشتر و تغییر رژیم رو می‌کرد، میدیا بنجامین بالای صحنه میاد و به شکلی از این دفعه حرف میزنه که بالاخره جهان به کنار ایران وایساد و با همدیگه برجام رو امضا کردن و غیر از ترامپ بقیه کشورهای دنیا دنبال حفظ برجام هستن.
Keep the deal. Let's talk about normal countries. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia.
چون برایان ها گفته بود که ایران کشور نرمالی نیست، میگه اما کشور معمولی حرف بزنیم. اگه ایران معمولی نیست، اما سعودی عربستان سعودی حرف بزنیم.
Is that who our allies are? They are the biggest threat to the world community. And let's talk. You're hurting me. You're actually hurting me.
میگه داری منو آزار میدید، من داری اذیت میکنید، دست منو. زن بسیار کوچک اندام هم هستش و این مردان از این جلسه به اون جلسه من واقعا بالا شخصا به شجاعتش تعظیم میکنم. خب برای اینکه بالاخره تو این جلسات میره، خودشو در معرض دستگیر شدن قرار میده و این
Do you think these sanctions are hurting the regime or are they hurting the Iranian people?
شما فکر میکنین که تحریم ها حکومت ایران رو آسیب میزنه بهش یا مردم ایران رو آسیب میزنه؟
They're hurting the Iranian people.
نه،
You were
مردم
making
ایران
a
آسیب میزنه.
case for a war with Iran. How did the war with Iraq turn out? You're doing exactly the same thing we did in the case of Iraq. We don't want another war in the Middle East. Let's
you want to
see.
go outside and give
How does Iraq turn out? How did Libya turn out? We have the people of Syria suffering. And how dare you bring up the issue of Yemen? It's the Saudi bomb people in Yemen. So let's get real. No more.
در حالی که در ایران سلبریتی ها کسانی هستند که با ماشین خارجی پوز میدن و هنرشون اینه که میتونن تهمانده درجه هفتم سلبریتی های غربی رو تازه اداشو در بیارن. من فکر میکنم که کسی مثل میدیا بنجامین که در تقریبا همسن مادر من هستش، بالای 70 سالشه و در بالای 70 سالگی خودش رو در معرض دستگیر شدن، کتک خوردن و لهوله برده شدن توسط یک سری سکیوریتی و نیروهای حراست این وزارتخونه و اون وزارتخونه و تعقیب شدن توسط CIA و شنود شدن توسط FBI قرار میده. به سلبریتی واقعی است و من خیلی خوشحالم که روز گذشته باهاش مصاحبه کردم که حدود 43-4 دقیقه بودش و شما 15 دقیقهش رو به صورت زیرنویس شده میتونید ببینید. برای دیدن این مصاحبه کامل باید به کانال انگلیسی جدال بیاید که من با افتخار اعلام میکنم که از امشب کار شروع میشه و میتونید اون رو تقاضا میکنم که اون رو سابسکرایب کنید، به بقیه معرفی کنید که مصاحبه‌های فراوانی اونجا خواهیم داشت و بخشی از تلاش من از امشب از این هفته مصروف مصاحبه‌های انگلیسی خواهد بود. خیلی از شما خواستید، گفتین که ما به شکلی به ایرانی مقیم خارج همسرامون دوستانمون انگلیسی هستن و میخوایم این بخش از این اطلاعات به اونها منتقل شه. این بالاخره خواسته شما اجابت شد و من اگرچه نتونستم تیمی بسازیم که کمک کنه تا حالا، خودم رو نصف کردم و نصف تلاش و وقتم رو از این بعد روی برنامه‌های انگلیسی خواهم گذاشت. لطفاً کمک کنید اونجا و همینطور هم مثل همیشه اگر در توانتون هستش به پترون ما بپیوندید، به ما کمک کنید و با راه‌های دیگه، با کمک در ایران، با پیپل و با عضویت، سابسکرایب کردن، کامنت گذاشتن، لایک گذاشتن و معرفی ما به بقیه اجازه بدید که برنامه‌های ما دو زبانه شه و بتونیم در فضای غیر فارسی هم از این به بعد فعالیت کنیم. این شما و این مصاحبه‌ای که من روز گذشته با میدیا بنجامین کردم. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation, Media, and I'm very glad that you are on this show. I've been following your actions for many years, as a lot of Iranians have been following them. They've been coming up to even mainstream media. It's been very difficult to ignore what you've been doing, especially during those very difficult years of maximum pressure campaign, which to some extent they haven't finished yet, but we will talk about them later. Let me start with this. We have entered the 6th month of Israel's genocidal war against people of Gaza, and a lot of eyes across Middle East, across Palestine and in the world are on the protest movement, especially in America as the main sponsor and backer of this genocidal war. And you are in the heart and center of this protest movement. So based on your observation and experience, how this movement has developed, how has it grown, what has it achieved, and finally, do you think it's capable of doing anything significant in stopping Israel's war machine?
This grassroots movement is really unprecedented when it comes to the issue of Israel, and it is changing the narrative, particularly among the younger generation. We see massive protests in the street. We see interruptions of leaders when they go out to speak at public events. We see the work that my organization has been doing in Congress, where we are running after all of these elected officials and demanding that they stop supporting Israel. We see these wonderful encampments that have now been planted outside the Embassy of Israel, as well as the house of the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. So I think the change has been one of narrative. It used to be you couldn't talk about anything except what happened on October 7th. Now we certainly can not only talk about what's happened since October 7th, but what happened before October 7th. You used to never be able to use the word genocide. Now, thanks to South Africa and the case in the International Court of Justice, we can talk about genocide. In terms of change of policy, that is much slower. We hear a change of rhetoric coming from the White House where Biden acts like he cares about the innocent civilians being killed, but he hasn't taken the most obvious action, which is to stop U.S. military and financial support for Israel. And the same is true in Congress, where we see a lot more members of Congress calling for a ceasefire. But when it comes to pledging that they will not vote for more money for Israel, they don't want to make that commitment.
I was part of the anti-war movement when the war on Iraq happened in 2003, but it didn't manage to stop the war. Do you think this one is different? And do you think, I mean, you've been on the streets for the last 4 or 5 decades, I think. Do you think this is going to do anything significant to stop the war?
Well, we have seen a very significant change in the public opinion polls where the majority of people want to see a ceasefire, but also according to recent public opinion polls, the majority also want to stop giving or selling weapons to Israel because it's an election season and because Israel continues to rebuff what Biden is calling for example, about the attack in the pending invasion of Rafah, which the U.S. president has told Israel not to do. If Israel goes ahead and does that, there could be a significant response from the U.S. But as I said before, it is way too little and way late.
All the polls show that Biden almost endangered his re-election by his Israel policy, and yet we don't see enough changes in that. And that's why people outside US don't understand how is it possible that he's going against his re-election. Can you explain a bit of that? I mean, is it really the Israel lobby so powerful in US that Biden can say no to his base and then just go for the elite who's going to sponsor his campaign?
Well, in the Congress, we certainly see the power of the Israel lobby. It's not just the money that is given to the election campaigns. It's also the fear that people in Congress have of being kicked out by a challenger supported by the pro-Israel lobby, the most powerful among them being AIPAC. When it comes to the White House, it's a bit more complicated. Certainly Biden in his career has been supported by AIPAC and has been very close to AIPAC. But Biden has been, in general, very close to Israel. And I think it's almost part of his DNA at this point. He finds it very hard to disconnect from that lifetime affiliation that he has had with Israel. So I think it's a number of things. But certainly we can't discount the impact that the lobby has on not just the policy now, but what the policy has been for decades.
I would like to take you to the question on Iran a bit and ask you, as someone who's been in Washington for many, many years and you know how the system works, what is this deep-seated anti-Iran sentiments across the parties and in every single institution in Washington, and thing which doesn't go away? Even with JPCOA, it became diluted a bit and then came back even stronger. Yeah, doesn't matter whether it's Obama, Trump, Biden, or even before that during the Bush and Clinton. So where does it come from, and why is it so persistently present?
It's very much related to the Israel issue and Israel's animosity towards Iran and Iran's animosity towards Israel has played out in the U.S. With these same organizations like the pro-Israel lobby AIPAC and other groups like the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, other think tanks. They have constantly been on Israel's side trying to create more disturbance and between the United States and Iran. They have always been against the Iran nuclear deal. They faulted Obama for having gone into that deal. And they've always been trying to find ways to blame Iran for everything bad that happens in the region and beyond the region. in terms of what's happening in Israel right now, they blame Iran for Hamas. Of course, they blame Iran for Hezbollah. They blame Iran for the Houthis. They blame Iran for the militant groups in Iraq. What they see is Iran as the evil behind everything wrong that is going on. For example, there is a lot of discussion about the Houthis and their disruption of commercial traffic on the Red Sea. And this is all seen as Iran's doing, as if the Houthis have no agency of their own. They are just following Iran's dictates.
Regarding your trip to Iran, you traveled to Iran, I think, more than once. What was your take on those trips? What did you achieve? What was your strategy with these delegation diplomacy, and did you achieve what you wanted?
We certainly don't go with any political agenda. We go as citizen diplomats, and our mission is to make friends with the Iranian people and to try to improve relations with the Iranian people. And so I have really enjoyed every trip that I have made. My most memorable times, our experiences are just talking to people on the street. And I love the complexity of the Iranian people and the intellect of the Iranian people. I certainly don't say, even having written a book inside Iran that you have just put up, I don't think that I can say that I understand all of the complexities of Iranian politics, but I do understand that the United States should not be interfering in the internal affairs of Iran. The Iranian people should be able to determine their own government, their own destiny. And so my goal is to make friends with Iranians, but try to stop my government from its interference.
So you've been following Iranian opposition, I believe, in the last few years, and suddenly they became very powerful alongside this campaign of maximum pressure. What's your opinion on the Iranian opposition, and especially the famous figures such as Masih Ali-Nejad or Shah's son Reza Pahlavi and figures like that who seem to be very close to American establishment?
I think getting close to the U.S. establishment is the kiss of death for the legitimacy of any opposition group, dissidents inside Iran. It has to be indigenous, it has to be of the people, it has to be totally separate from the U.S. government. And I think it's a terrible mistake for Iranians who want to be involved in future policy in Iran to get close to U.S. officials because it really undermines any legitimacy they have. And certainly many of them have legitimate issues that they are fighting about, but you have to do it in a way that is separate from a government like the United States that has a history of overthrowing democratic governments in Iran, has a history of destroying democratic movements inside Iran. So I would say, stay away. Don't go in the White House. Don't go in the State Department. Don't take any money from the U.S. government if you want to be considered legitimate opposition in Iran. I know many Iranian women have the freedom to go where they want, and they are the majority in the universities and businesses, and so there are many achievements of Iranian women that people here in the United States don't know anything about it. But certainly there are restrictions on Iranian women in the court system, in other ways, and those restrictions must be changed, and it must be changed by Iranian women themselves, who have made significant changes over the past decades and would continue and are continuing to make those changes. It's one thing to support Iranian women in their fight for more freedoms, just like I hope people overseas are supporting the U.S. women in their fight for more freedoms, including the freedom to make their choice about reproductive rights. Those kinds of solidarity should cross borders, but it shouldn't cross into the political realm where it's being manipulated to then have political implications that shouldn't be made. So I say support Iranian women in their struggles, just like we support women's struggles around the world, including here at home, but don't cross into using women's struggles as a vehicle for U.S. policies, U.S. intentions on Iran, U.S. efforts to interfere in the internal politics of Iran. We should not allow ourselves to get into that.
You are yourself coming from the Jewish background. If you elaborate on that, because I think, does this one make it easier for you to be an outspoken person? And also, are you also worried about the rise of anti-Semitism, as many people have been talked about it, but also like places like ADL and kind of more pro-Israeli lobbies, are they true in the fact that they are making anti-Semitism number one issue in the United States at the moment?
Certainly, I am worried about the rise of anti-Semitism, but there's one easy answer for that, which is to stop supporting the Israeli government. In terms of the rise of anti-Semitism, I think it's given a front and center as opposed to the equally disturbing rise of anti-Arab sentiment, anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Palestinian sentiment. Palestinian Americans in the United States are going through terrible times, and people who speak out for Palestinian rights are losing their jobs, are being suspended from educational institutions, and are having to sign oaths of that they will not support boycott, divestment, and sanctions in order to get certain contracts with states and governments. So it's a terrible time for the rise of divisive sentiments that are disturbing, whether it's the anti-Semitism or the hate against Arabs. So I think that is one more reason why we have to work for a quick solution to this issue of the Israeli slaughter of people in Gaza, because it will continue to foment these divisions, and it also will give rise to white nationalists, to really very right-wing, dangerous groups in this country and throughout Europe and other places that are gaining strength in the midst of this divisive atmosphere.